So we are good to go for dev call for September. Not a whole lot to talk about this month. We probably need to get into a better habit of in the future now that GRCon is done to really get stuff going on the agenda and get stuff in the project moving. But we are just coming off of GRCon and that took a lot out of me. I don't know about everybody else. Plus the fact that I had to ping pong back to Europe and back and all that stuff. So there's lots of stuff going on in my life. So I haven't had a chance to do a huge amount. But I did just want to kind of wrap up GRCon 15. I have been meaning to post about this on my website, but overall, I thought it was a massive success. I was really happy with the audience, the speakers, the facilities, the weather, just everything. I'm not sure what we could have really done better this year, but I am willing to address people's issues or concerns or questions or thoughts for what to do next year. So does anybody have any comments on that? Okay. Cool. So everybody else thought it was as big a success as I did. I did send out a survey to the people that attended, and part of that, just to get their get other people's feedback. I think we as people in the development community and organizers, just talking to everybody offline, I think everybody thought it was a great thing all around. But we are trying to get feedback from the people that attended that might not have had direct access to us to explain what they thought could have been better, could have been improved upon. The one thing that's in that survey that I would like to try to get to a broader GNU Radio community is ideas for the location for next year. I mentioned at the end of the conference that it's likely that we're going to be doing this in Boulder. Since then, there's been a lot of people getting on me to keep it in DC. So we've got to make a decision between Boulder and DC. So I would like to figure out how to get a bigger audience to give me to give feedback on location. If you're going to make it, if it's in Boulder, is that a positive or negative? If it's in DC, is that a positive or negative?
Well, what would be the criteria? I mean, if it's just membership driven, it's pretty clear that DC would be the choice. So there were reasons why you came up with the idea originally.
Yep, good point. The main reason is that the University of Colorado Boulder has offered to work with us to host it, and that's a really compelling offer to get external help and aid from the professors there, the university structure, graduate students that we could have on hand, and people who are local to work out, facilities issues and things like that. So having a structure there is really compelling. So that's really what it is. Well, that's the main thing for why Boulder. The main thing for why not DC is just because we've done it in DC 2 years in a row. Both years have been great, and I wouldn't mind staying there personally. But I do kind of like this idea of traveling to different areas of the country, possibly in the future the world, but certainly for now the country, just to kind of shake things up a bit, get people out to someplace new, maybe attract different audiences that aren't going to be the same year after year. So that's part of it, is just to kind of keep things fresh. And so with that in mind, Boulder came up as a strong possibility. The other thing is Boulder is home to a very large NIST installation, and NIST does have pretty good facilities for hosting conferences. They have a lot of people there as well, and they're starting to do a lot of GNU Radio work. I mean, if you've looked, there's actually been a number of NIST people from the DC area that have come to the past couple of GRCons. So we have that facility out there as well that would be interested in this. The question, though, yeah, it's not so much that it's not directly membership driven, but at the same time, we wouldn't want to decrease the size of the conference next year. So it's kind of like if we can get 230, 250 next year in Boulder, I would still consider that a positive.
I think we should set our goal higher.
I think we should too. I'm just saying we don't want to go lower, but I think you're right. I think we should set it higher if we can.
Let's have it at Arecibo.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, not necessarily Arecibo.
Flights from the Bay Area are really cheap to Puerto Rico.
Oh, that's interesting.
They're really cheap to Mexico, too. No, one of the things that came up a couple years ago was the idea of having additional regional conferences in different parts of the world, not to replace the main one that we have in the U.S., but smaller events that would be, like South America or Western Europe or in Asia, to try to capture some of the communities that we're not seeing, we know, are using GNU Radio, but they either can't make a U.S. conference or don't want to or whatever. And so I had tried to organize one in South America 2 years ago and didn't quite hit critical mass with the people I know there. But I'm just wondering if this is an idea to sort of resurrect.
Yeah, I think the way that we've that's come up, and I think it probably is worth thinking about. Honestly, the main reason why that hasn't really come up is because the resources to put on a yearly conference are pretty large and fairly draining. On the other hand, we have done these hack fests, which are much smaller in scope and in population, but that is a way to try to move around and attract different talent. I've also tried to do things when I go to different conferences to have GNU Radio meetups or tack on something GNU Radio related to another wireless conference. A potential from that perspective for Boulder, given that they are providing a lot of energy or willing to provide a lot of energy and manpower into the creation of a conference. Boulder also puts on the ISART conference, which I've been to the first time this year, which is the International Symposium on Advanced Radio Technologies. It's a great conference that brings in a lot of technology, but also economic, law, policy people to discuss, kind of spectrum and wireless technology in all facets, including the regulatory stuff, which has kind of started to become more important to us with the latest FCC NPRM and different discussions around that. So I was thinking it'd be great potentially to host something alongside ISART before or after, and that would put us in Boulder to kind of connect with that group, as well as maybe have a little bit of overlap with ISART. Now the problem is that I think that they generally do their conference in like June or July. So we'd have to figure out if that timing would work for us. But it wouldn't work for us for the full conference, but maybe we do a smaller thing alongside that.
Yeah, I was just mostly thinking of ways to capture people that no matter where we have the annual event in the U.S., they're not going to make it there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and the way of sort of glomming on to other events is fine, if that helps.
Yeah. I mean, it's a better excuse at this point, and because we often get to ride on other people having done the facilities work and things like that. It's like, and it's kind of why we do FOSDEM. The SDR Dev Room is not GNU Radio specifically, but definitely there's a strong flavor of GNU Radio there. So that's a great one in Europe. But yeah, it'd be cool to think about how we do this in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thought was it wouldn't be a conference-style event. It would be more like a local users group, 10 to 20, 30 people kind of in size, that would then, sort of grow the community with local resources rather than having everything to be managed, by one of us.
Sure. Yeah.
In other words, just sort of planting seeds, to have local groups that can, pick up some of the administration kind of thing.
Us latching on to other conferences has worked quite well, though. I mean, FOSDEM, for example, is it's not like it's a small user group thing. Like we had the SDR track like 2 years in a row now, and I'm assuming we'll have it next year again. And there's the room is always packed. There's a queue outside. There's huge interest, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And I mean, Tom's thing with SRIF, I don't know. I wasn't there, but it's still still a big conference where people hear about these things.
Yeah, we got about 30. We got 30 some people there.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a model that works. So, if that's if we expect that to continue working and be the way that we address communities outside the U.S., I'm all for it.
Okay, yeah. So I guess in the short term, at least, we keep our eye on opportunities like that. Possibly in the long term, be more proactive about creating those opportunities. Especially like, South America gets very little attention from the tech community. There are very few conferences down there that we can attach ourselves to. The big IEEE and ACM conferences tend to be US, Europe, and Asia.
There's been a fair number of IEEE regional conferences there. In Brazil or Argentina. So
any of the big ones, I guess Brazil has hosted maybe an ICC or something like that in the past.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah.
Anyway, I mean, we can address this after the call.
Sure, but I think from our perspective and from our user base perspective, a South American event I think is probably the thing that we should be a little bit more active about pursuing, because I think there's a pretty large user base potential there, and we just haven't gotten down there.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of years ago when I was trying to recruit for that kind of thing, my target was to identify 30 people that would show up, and I got to about 17.
Okay.
And I did actually have a university in Rio, in Brazil, that was willing to host the event, but without getting more people involved, it didn't pan out.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I guess then I think for us the thing to do here is keep an eye out for a good technical conference, IEEE or ACM, or maybe even other that I don't know about, happening. Probably Brazil, so wherever, or Brazil or Argentina would be my guesses where we'd see that. But if anybody sees anything like that, because there's probably the people you identified to come out already, and then if it's attached to a conference, we'll probably pull off people who are maybe more vaguely interested but would come anyway because it's already there. Okay, cool. So that's great. We still, and I think it's going to be, I'm putting this out there as in, feedback from our users and people who listen to this, feedback on the location for the next GRCon. I really think that it's going to be either Boulder or DC. I don't think there's much point in going way too far afield or having too many more options, because support in Boulder, and we know the DC community crowd and how to set things up. So one of those two. So I'll try to figure out a way to kind of get a bigger poll out there, and then as kind of more of the core developer community, we'll make a decision. Hopefully, soon. I'd like to do this, by January. I'd like to know where we're going to be. Any other conference-related questions or thoughts?
DC was epic. Best conference food ever. Well done.
Oh, thanks. Great.
The venue was fantastic. I hope we got our money's worth, but certainly it's been the best of everyone we've done. Yeah.
Yeah, no, certainly I feel very good about the cost of that facility, the location of it, and everything that we got from it. And one thing, I guess, that I just started doing, so big thanks to Jose Laura for for helping a lot with the conference in kind of general terms, but specifically he and Michael Dickens did a great job making sure the cameras were set up and recording all of the talks, and Jose has been editing those files. Just very basic editing of finding the start and stop times of the talks and making them into YouTube videos. I have already started to go through, I have Monday, and for whatever reason I did this, I have Monday and Wednesday. You can find the presentation link, and that'll just pop you over to YouTube for all the talks on those 2 days. And I should be able to get Tuesday up pretty quickly, and then we're waiting to finalize on Thursday. But the videos are going up there, and will be rolled out very, very soon. A lot of people have been asking for that. So it's great that there's that big interest, for one thing, and we're getting it out there. Alright, so if nothing else on GRCon, I would like to, for those of us, we generally have our working group summaries for each month. This time, there probably hasn't been a huge amount directly in September. So for those of you who are on, I would like to get kind of a brain dump of what happens at the at your working group meeting at GRCon. So Martin, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, wasn't sure if I was muted. Yeah, so last year's conference was a bit free for all. It wasn't really productive, and it ended up in just people talking about stuff. So this year I wanted to sort of, before we do anything at all, figure out what it is that people are interested in doing next. So what I'm trying to identify is areas where we can spin out task forces. And there was clear interest in having more tutorials, like the guided tutorials, but going into more of a direction of actual DSP tutorials, that kind of thing, but using GNU Radio at the same time. So there's a couple of people that have very specific interest, coming from like the college level education, but also other areas. So we're probably going to spin out a new task force that will start working on that. We haven't actually locked down though what that will look like. So clearly there's interest in having, like, say, a DSP beginner level class, something like that, using GNU Radio. So that would be a good place to start. But overall, the idea is that we want to create a platform for people to share their teaching and tutorial materials. And the reason this is kind of unclear is we already have the wiki page on the GNU Radio website where people just add tutorials, but that's a bit too free-form, like the quality is variable, and we want to make sure that we have high quality. So the next couple of weeks I'll be starting to put together a first call where people can participate and bring in their ideas, and we'll probably start working on some kind of tutorial similar to the guided tutorials, but sort of the next step of that. But eventually we want to have sort of a whole batch of different tutorials for different levels of people. That's the goal.
That's great. I think that's going to make a huge difference, even more than so much better documentation or improving the manual. I think people really just learn from the tutorials. So awesome. Yeah. One thing that I've been thinking about in regards to this, and even like regards to the current guided tutorials, is the GR samples project that I started and Chris was interested in helping out on. What I'm trying to do there is have like the most simple possible flow graph to exercise a given block. So for every block, there's like one example that gives you sliders or variables to manipulate the parameters, so that you can see what happens when you change the parameters. You can see what the output's supposed to look like given us the input, things like that. I think that's going to be really helpful as just, hey, I've got this new block, I've read the documentation, but I don't understand it. Now here's something to go play with. My biggest concern with that, and it's a minor concern with the tutorials as they are, is bit rotting. I would love to be able to have a structure in place that, as we do our QA test for the rest of GNU Radio, I'd love to be able to pursue something like that within the GR samples project and even the tutorials, so that as things move, as we change, 3.7 to 3.8, that we have a way to test that and kind of verify that we're still doing the right thing, or if we screw something up, we know it and can fix it quickly. So I think a better testing infrastructure to support this stuff is going to be important. Okay, so that's great. Any other big items, or was that the main thing that you focused on?
We focused on that one thing, and we had so I can just sort of go through how the whole thing was. I suggested a couple of items, and there were some things that other people were interested in, such as increasing, I termed it business development, and another one was just general documentation improvements. But we sort of focused on that one subject, being the tutorials, for the rest of the actual meeting group session.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. All right. So let's go to, let's see, who do I see next? I see Nathan next.
Yeah. So the working group session went pretty well, I thought. And then during the Hackfest, several people worked on things that we discussed during the meeting. And so that was pretty good. There were several things that just got resolved basically the next day. The big thing that was not necessarily a surprise but new to me was there was a request for tutorials on how to use Volk inside of your own out-of-tree module. So I spent the Hackfest going through the current guided tutorial, and it uses Volk, but it's not a very good example of actually using Volk. So I'm interested in the tutorials that are upcoming, I guess, to see what we can do there.
And it probably would be good to have a thing that is focused on, here's a tutorial for how to use Volk, as opposed to, I think it's great to wrap it into other tutorials, but if people just want to use Volk, they're stuck there. They don't necessarily want to read everything else around this other example or tutorial that's being built up, and something that's just focused on that.
Yeah. So let's see.
And you said that there was stuff that was brought up that that was basically resolved immediately in the Hackfest.
Yeah. So there was reproducible builds came up. And we fixed that during the Hackfest. A big code change, I guess, is several people expressed interest, including me, in developing sort of an internal library of wrapping up small chunks of code that is used over and over again. So, for example, the example that I was using is complex multiplies. You have lots of kernels that do complex multiplies, and every time you do one, it's 4 or 5 lines of code. So building an internal library for specific architectures where we have code where you just call multiply, and it does that, and it gets inlined into your actual code kernel. So Johannes started on that. There's a pull request I need to go through. But yeah, we've had good progress with stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, you guys are you doing any performance analysis, benchmarking before and after to make sure that, or looking at the assembly to make sure that the inlining is happening?
There yet. There was concern that I guess when you use the inline keyword, it's a suggestion, not a requirement for the compiler.
Yeah. But hopefully with intrinsics and small, very, very small, manageable chunks, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
But it would be good to...
The real goal here is, I could be totally wrong, but I don't think the function function call overhead is as significant as going back and forth from memory.
Okay.
So the idea is to make the ability to easily construct more complex kernels that do more things.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely have some benchmarking when we get there.
Okay. Awesome. Who else do we have? Doug. Can't hear you, Doug. All right. Well, so Doug, if you can hear us, we can't hear you. So maybe you can work that out. So we don't have representatives from GRC, the embedded working group, or the functional architectures working group. Anybody present here today that was any of those three that can maybe give us a brief summary of what you saw there?
I was in the GRC working group, but I was just trying to think. I obviously hadn't prepared this. There was so Seth led that working group meeting, and we tried to avoid it becoming a complaint fest.
Yeah.
And it kind of worked out. I think what happened was we actually identified some volunteers to help with individual items. But Ethan stepped up, but he already had kind of stepped up in the past to help with GRC development. Oh my god. I know there was some decision made regarding the Qt ports, but I can't remember what it was. Yeah, sorry. That's all I have off the top of my head.
Okay.
Oh. Does that sound better?
Yes.
All right. So I think the main discussion item that was, I'll say, terribly useful in our the working group session for coprocessors was ended up having a fairly in-depth discussion about the callback APIs that could be useful for device driver developers wanting to schedule when the DMA back and forth from sort of main memory to device memory should be happening. So Martz and I ended up talking a lot about how that should work, and we had a little bit of discussion about how that should be interacting with the GNU Radio scheduler. I don't think we have any code yet that really talks about this, but that was something that was a useful discussion at least. And then the other big thing was that during the Hackfest, I was able to come up with a version of my custom buffers branch that I think is at least palatable to Jonathan now, and I would like other people to start looking at and testing with.
Yeah, I actually did look through it. It does look really good. I think it provides what's needed for the individual buffer subclasses and without baking in a bunch of scheduler knowledge.
Yeah, so I may just send out another announcement to the mailing list to try and get other people to look at it and get thoughts. But I think it is at least getting very close to being ready for merging.
Okay. Well, one thing is it's kind of a no-op merge if it were to happen now, because it doesn't affect anything unless you do something. So once you're happy with the code, I mean, I see no reason not to get it in there, if everyone agrees with the approach, because it won't affect anybody. It'll give it a chance to get compiled on a bunch of different systems, and people can see it without having to go check out your specific branch. I don't know. It might be a little early for that, but I mean, you tell me when you think it's good for that.
Yeah, my only hesitation at this point is I'd like to have at least a single out-of-tree module using it and doing something useful to be able to say, okay, now we know that it is, that it is a workable solution. So okay. I'll be working on that. Well, I am starting to work on that. So when that looks like it's working, I think I'll open up a pull request.
Cool. What's your target coprocessor?
Right now it's OpenCL because that's fairly easy.
Okay.
So I wasn't in Tim's working group, but I know they talked about the the lambda idea of like splitting up the kernels from the actual way that blocks operate.
Yeah, actually, I was in that one.
Okay.
So, and I don't remember everything that Tim would have wanted to report out on that, but we did discuss the idea of two things: breaking everything up into the functionality of a block being something that could be then wrapped by a class that knows how to treat it as a streaming block, as a message passing block, or as whatever other semantics that we want to come up with. And I think most of the meeting was really, since it was like the first time we'd had that large of a group of people interested, it was really sort of getting off the ground on what the group was about and what the main things it wanted to consider. And one of the things was a separation of the control path stuff into elsewhere, and that the FAS working group would be really focused on this data movement problem rather than the control layer that sits on top of it, but might share some of the same like configuration methods.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this idea of trying to figure out how to make blocks kind of generic and what form they take.
Well, I mean, one of the ideas that was batted around quite a bit was instead of having, we have like 400 blocks, and that means we have 400 C++ classes. And actually a large chunk of those, probably 100 of them, are no configuration items, no getters or setters. You just create the block. And yet there's different classes for all those. So one of the ideas that was discussed at length was, could we have the idea of creating a single class that knows how to be all these different things, and you pass it, like a bindable function pointer for the work function.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of having 100 classes that all have just make in them, it would be one class where you'd point the work function and just make that. We didn't get much beyond, hey, this is a good idea, and Tim is working on prototyping a similar concept in Python, where you have a Python block and you pass it a Python function as the work function.
Right, okay.
As a way of sort of identifying what some of the problems might be with that approach.
Yep.
But, the end goal of simplifying our block library into DSP functions that can then be wrapped by a framework that does all these different things means that we're much more flexible in getting all the legacy stuff that's in there into like PDU format blocks and tag stream blocks and whatnot.
Yep. Yeah, okay, good ideas. Yeah. Cool. Anything else I'm thinking of? No. Anybody at the embedded? So I haven't talked to Philip yet, or I haven't heard from him yet on what happened there. Philip's big deal in the embedded systems working group is just to provide stable support. It possibly expands the number of kind of approved devices that we understand and can support in the embedded space. But yeah, I'd like to see where he's thinking of going in the future with that. All right. Well, if there's nothing else,
yeah. Oh, go ahead. I have a brief comment, not a working group thing.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to wrap up the working group session. So. Yeah, so if nobody has any comments on the working group or questions on that, yeah, Jonathan?
Sort of in response to a whole series of difficult interactions on the mailing list, I went ahead and unsubscribed the Ruby Forum mailing list item from the discuss list. And, I don't know if that is a permanent thing. They haven't tried to resubscribe, and I don't know if we really want to make it a permanent thing. So I just want to let everyone know that happened.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm unsure what to do in general about that, because obviously people go to the Ruby forums because, for whatever reason, that's how they come to this. And maybe somebody can fill me in on why they think that that's what happens.
It shows up really high in Google search results for GNU Radio, whatever.
Yeah, there's two reasons. One is it's an indexable website rather than a mailing list. So we have our Discuss GNU Radio archives, but it shows up very high in Google results. Two, there's a lot of people that think mailing lists are, old school, like voicemail and pagers. And so, forums are the cool way to go, especially if they're written in PHP. And so, they would rather do that than subscribe to a mailing list.
Sure. Which means that if we ignore them or block them, we're potentially, removing a huge chunk of potential people who might just get more annoyed that they're not getting any support.
Yeah. So I don't know what the best choice of action is for that, but anyway, we'll see if they how long it takes them to notice that they've been unsubscribed.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a question because we need to somehow put out a promotion campaign or something like that about subscribing to the mailing list. I don't know if there's any way that we can get the mailing list webpage on the wiki higher, because nobody actually really clicks on that. It's just a page that's been there and we point people to, but yeah. So it's like, I mean, this is the problem with a lot of the comments that have been coming up on the mailing list is we don't want to be rude, and sometimes people just are, they're more clueless, but can be clued in quite easily if we take the time to do it, versus people who who just kind of take up our time. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we've been managing that for 15 years.
Yeah.
So
I think it's by the time it gets to the mailing list, it's far past the time we can influence that. I think setting proper expectations ahead of time on what skills you need to use this and how to acquire those skills it would result in better mailing list interactions.
I have a question. So people can still post on Ruby forum, right? It just won't get forwarded to the mailing list and vice versa. Is that true?
I don't really know. Chris, do you know?
I just pulled it up. So there's a new post from yesterday, GNU Radio Raspberry Pi. It's not on the mailing list, and it's one of those posts where people actually, they sort of made a little bit of effort to format the question. Yeah. I was wondering if we can just put a sticky post or something on that. I don't know, like, who owns that forum or something. We just have a sticky post at the top, like, explaining that, it's not forbidden to ask stuff here, but none of the developers are actually on this forum. If you want to get actual help, you'll need to go to this page, and that page would be our mailing list wiki page.
Yeah, does anybody know Ruby forums enough to know if those kind of sticky posts work or are available to us?
Not even a little.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we people are going to look for other people to get help from in a variety of places. Stack Overflow and even the G+ GNU Radio group. So we can't stop that, but we can stop, setting the expectation that their content is going to come from our mailing list.
Yeah.
If they want to have a community there, and if it works out, maybe we should be reading Ruby forums and responding there. But the linkage with the mailing list has been problematic.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, and I'm a big supporter of continuing our efforts with Stack Overflow. If we can, and there have been efforts to answer questions on there, and that's been great. I think if we can focus on that, that might start to squash a few questions that might come through Ruby, the Ruby whatever forums, because they'll find the answers on Stack Overflow instead, because Google will direct them there. I'd love to see more of that happening. All right, then the last two things on the agenda for today. Marcus, I think you're echoing. Thank you. I just put this up because I made an announcement the other day about some spreadsheets that I created. So we'd like to continue to do more with putting Volk into GNU Radio. There are certain places that it's a major win that we've kind of ignored or we've forgotten or we just overlooked to put a quick thing. I think like the biggest one in my mind that I keep thinking about this and then I keep not doing it is the multiply const VCC version of the block, the vector version, which is the default when you're using GRC. So multiply const CC uses Volk, multiply const VCC does not. So you're getting, by default in GRC, you're getting the unoptimized complex multiplier. So I made I talked to Nathan, I think Doug, a few of us were kind of like passing this idea or ideas around. I was like, well, all right, let's make a spreadsheet. I basically took all of the public classes and blocks that in GNU Radio, which actually isn't everything we need, but it'll encompass a huge amount. Threw up a spreadsheet about that for hopefully people can use that as a way to say to try to fix, rationalize, figure out which blocks are available for optimization. I haven't really filled it in as which blocks already have Volk. I'm kind of hoping that we can all kind of as a community do that. So that'll probably be useful as a thing just to keep track of our progress on doing more with Volk and optimizations within the blocks. The second spreadsheet that I put up was Peter Mathis was nice enough during GRCon, during the Hackfest, to kind of walk through every block that he could pull up in GRC and see if the documentation came through and provided enough information. And so he gave me a huge list of blocks that didn't, and a number of those are because they were Python blocks, either higher block or mostly just higher blocks or some form in Python, and that's not moving the documentation properly into GRC. So that's probably the biggest problem that we have with the documentation as far as what documentation is written not being available in GRC. Sebastian has said that he's got a branch that he's working to do better about that. So that might clear up a huge amount there already. But there are other concerns, and there are other blocks that are underdocumented. And so I'd kind of like to have, and this spreadsheet is, again, just a way for us to keep track of who's doing what and what needs doing for helping document each individual block. In a way, this was for me and whoever else started to get interested in these things. But I decided to go ahead and post it to the mailing list as an opportunity for people in the community if they, I'm hoping that given some fairly straightforward, well-defined tasks like help us fix this block's documentation, or if you want to optimize some stuff with Volk, here's a good way to look to see what needs doing. Those are fairly constrained problems, which I'm hoping that some people new to the developing community who want to get more involved can use this as kind of an easy in. We've tried this in the past with the issues, the Redmine issues, but they tend to be the ones that don't get knocked out immediately tend to be very complex issues that need, Jonathan or myself or one of the, Michael or Nathan, depending on the level or the area that they encompass. So that's a hard one. And then Coverity has been often unsuccessful depending on how much we promote it as here's some issues that Coverity found. This is just another way for me to push out if you are looking to help that these are good problems to attack. So I just kind of wanted to explain that a bit.
Do we still have the sort of a policy goal of re-implementing in C++ the stuff that we have in Python now?
Yes, but it's not been a formalized policy. I wouldn't mind making that into a thing at this point because, especially with my work on Android going into more C++ world, we need a lot of these things moved over to support that anyways. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll put together a spreadsheet, a similar spreadsheet on that. Like here are all the Python blocks that we have, higher blocks that we have that we'd like to see in C++. And make that an official thing. And of course, for anybody listening who may be panicking. This is obviously not that we're not supporting Python. This is we want to, it will still be wrapped into Python, so you'll have it accessible in Python, but now you will also have it accessible in C++.
Yeah, I mean the goal was, like for example, in GR Digital, almost all of our packet-based infrastructure is Python. And so if you're trying to write a C++ only application, you don't have the benefit of any of that.
Yep.
And so, I mean, the idea was that you could do anything in C++ that you could do in Python. It might be a little harder, but it would be possible.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was originally done in Python because like string manipulation is so easy in Python.
Yeah, right. So I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily a hard drawn line that, eventually everything is going to be in C++, but in the context of this documentation, it may be just as easy to take a higher block written in Python and write it into C++. Same name, same options, everything. It would, after Swig, it would not look any different.
Right.
But then the documentation would be the same as anything else.
Right. Yep. Yep. I'll try to throw together a spreadsheet on that as well, since I've done these other two, just as bookkeeping strategies. All right. Cool. Well, so that wraps up my agenda. I called for additions to the agenda before we started, but after 50 minutes, does anybody have any other things you guys want to bring up?
So what I'm trying to do is prepare for FOSDEM next year. So the call for participation isn't out yet, but so this is worrying me a little bit because you need a certain amount of time to set up a track at FOSDEM, and so I'm just kind of sort of crossing my fingers and hoping that once it gets out, we actually get in, because we've been quite successful in the last couple of years, and then within that premise, I'm sort of starting to put together like a preliminary call for participation for the SDR stuff. So if you can be in Brussels next year, end of January, last weekend of January, in fact. There's a high chance a very high chance it will have an SDR track again, and if there's anything you want to present on, you can contact me, to get your name down.
Yep, awesome. Did we hear when the call for participation might be out?
No, that's the thing. Like, they just keep saying, yeah, it's going to be out whenever it's out. So, like, free software mentality. It doesn't really work with conferences.
Yeah. And Sylvain asked on IRC about Hackfest news. Do we want to say anything about that?
So, I don't really want to say anything right now. There's also an extremely high chance that there'll be a Hackfest prior to FOSDEM somewhere in Central Europe. That's the most I'd like to commit at this point. But yeah, so for the European crowd, we'd like to have offer the opportunity to participate in Hackfest, and I'm on that, and I'll be updating people as soon as I have something more specific.
Okay. That's fair, but I think it is useful to let the community out there know that we're looking to do something.
So FOSDEM is like the last weekend of January, the 30th and the 31st, I believe, and then Monday through Thursday. Prior to that, that's when I'm planning to have the Hackfest.
Yep.
So and maybe somewhere in Germany. That's sort of where I'm starting to look. I'm open to suggestions, but I'd like to have it somewhere interesting. Just so we can tap into the local community.
Sure. Okay. That's great. Yeah, hopefully we'll have by next dev call we'll have more information on FOSDEM and the Hackfest to start promoting, because it's October, so only a few months away really. Good. So, unless there's anything else, I think we can wrap this up. Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.